All right, guys, so now we're going to actually build a little project using the key code information that we learned in the last video. So this is actually a production application at toptal.com/developer/keycode, and it says press any key to get the JavaScript event key code info, which is the stuff we looked at in the last video. So I'm just going to hit a random key. I'll use the letter L, and what it's going to give us, this 76, this is actually the event.keycode. Remember, we have a number for every key. And then down here, you can see what you get for event.key, which would be L. You have event.code, which would be key L. We're not going to do these other things, which you could, because these are also on the event object. But what I want to do is kind of recreate this application and just show the event.key, the event.keycode, and the event.code. All right, now what you'll have in the starter files is simply the HTML and CSS. If I hit a key, nothing's going to happen right now because it's just HTML and CSS. Now, this is actually from my 50 projects in 50 days course. However, in the course, we did it kind of the quick and dirty way where we just used inner HTML and then set these three, basically these three divs. Okay, I'm going to show you that way, but I'm also going to show you a better, cleaner, more performant way where we actually create each of these key elements in the DOM, and then we insert them. And we're going to be using a for in loop. We're going to be using an object. We're going to be, doing stuff. We're going to use pretty much everything we've been talking about up to this point. So I think it's a good project for this point in time. Now, if we go to the HTML, you can see I just have everything hard-coded, right? And there is some styling, just some very basic styling here. I didn't want to go through the CSS or type out the CSS, but just background color on the body. And then each of these boxes are going to be a div with the class of key. So I have the border, the background, and then we have a small tag, which is going to be each of these. So if we look at our HTML, each of those titles are in small tags. Okay, but what we want this to do is be dynamic so that this changes, and this changes based on whatever key we hit. Now, if you want to pause the video and try this on your own, I would encourage you to do that. But it's understandable if you're just learning this stuff, you might not be able to do that just yet. So, and again, I'm going to show you two ways of doing it. The first way is really simple, but I would actually recommend the second way. So let's say I'm just going to call this method 1 of doing this. And there's so many different ways you could do it. So we're going to take, what I'm going to do is just listen on the window for an event. All right, because I don't want, we're not going to have a specific element where you push a key like we did in the last video with the input form. As long as it's on the window, then we want to fire this off. So let's say window.addEventListener. And we want to listen for a key down event. And then I'm going to call a function. Actually, for this one, I'll just put the function right in here. And I'll use an arrow function. So we want to pass in our event object. And then what I'm going to do is take the insert element, this right here, and pretty much just create all this HTML, but with having this dynamic, these three items here. These should be they should come from those key code properties. So let's I guess, yeah, we'll just bring the insert in right here. So let's say insert equals document dot, and we'll just use get element by D and insert. And then I'm simply going to take insert and just edit the inner HTML. So I'm going to set that to some backticks. And then all we really have to do is bring in this stuff as a template. So I'm going to just grab these three divs with the class of key and cut those. And for now, as far as when you just first come to the page, we'll just have a message that says press any key to get the key code. Okay, so when we come to this to the website, it'll just show us this. All right, and then I'm going to just paste in those three divs here, and you might just have to kind of format this a little bit to look a little better. So we'll just push these over. All right. Now we just want to replace these three. So the first one is going to be the E dot key. So let's simply replace that with our syntax, our $, curly braces, and just say E dot key. And then we'll come down here and replace this and make this dynamic. So this will be E dot key code. And then this one will be, whoops, that should be a money sign. This should be E dot code. All right, and that should actually do it. And if I come over here and I hit, let's say, the F key, you see I get F for the key property, 70 for the key code, and key F for the code. If I hit W, if I hit N, if I hit enter, if I hit the digit 1. Now, the one thing that you want to look out for is with the space. So with the space button, the key is actually just an empty string or a space in the string. So what we can do here is just say, right in here, we'll say if the, we'll have a condition. So we'll say if this is equal to a space like that, then let's just have the word space. Else, then we'll show whatever the key is. So now if we hit space, now space will get put in there instead of just an empty string. I shouldn't say an empty string, but a space. All right, so that's kind of the easy, quick and dirty way of doing it, and there's nothing wrong with this. I'm not like one of those sticklers that thinks everything has to be perfect. This works just fine, but I do want to show you an alternate way of doing it as well. So let's go ahead and just comment this out. And then I'm going to come down here and we'll say method 2. And this is going to show us not just, we're going to touch on a lot of things that we've talked about so far. So again, we're going to add on the window object, we're going to add an event listener, and we want to listen for key down. And then I'll put this in a separate function. Let's call it show key codes. If you want to keep it in, you know, just a regular anonymous function, that's fine. Whoops, we definitely don't want those. So let's come up here and let's say function and show key codes. Okay, we want to pass in our event object. And then we want to select the insert again. So I'm just going to grab that. Okay, so we have our insert. That's what we're obviously where we want to insert these keys into. And then the way that I'm going to do this, remember there's so many ways to do the same thing, but what I'm going to do is create an object, kind of a map. I could even use a JavaScript map, but we haven't gone over that yet. So let's say key codes, set that to an object literal, and then for the key, I want to use, you know, e.key code, etc. But since there's a dot, we have to, if we want this to work as an object with key value pairs, we have to put quotes around that. Okay, because that's the key, it's the title. The actual key is going to go in here, so e.key. Now we do want to test for space again, so basically we can do this same thing that we did right here. So I'll just put that in there. It's just going to test to see if it's an empty space. If it is, it'll just replace it with a string space. So next we want the key code property. So for the title here, we'll just say key code. Make sure you put quotes around that, and the value is going to be e.key code, which will be the actual value. And then we also want e.code. The value for that is going to be e.code. So what we'll do now is let's just do a console log of key codes and see what that gives us. So if I come over here and we open up our console, and if I just type something in, I'll hit the letter F. So now we're going to get an object that has our key code, and our code. If I hit the enter, so any key, it's going to just give us this object. Now I want to actually loop through this object, and remember, to do that we can use a for in loop, because the idea here is to loop through them and create one of those divs, one of these divs for each of these. All right, so a div with the class of key for each of these. We want to create that. We want to insert the text node, which will be the whatever the value is. Also, we'll create a small tag and append that into the key and add a text node to small as well. So we're basically like we're building it up. Okay, we're building it from scratch rather than just replacing the HTML. So to do that, let's say for, and what we want to have in here is, let's say let key in key codes, which is the name of the object. And I want to start to build up our elements. So let's say const div, and we'll set that to document dot, and we want to create a new element. So create element, we want to create a div element. Okay, and then let's add the key class to that. So we'll say div dot class name, and we'll set that to key. Right, now we also want a small element, so I'm going to create that as well. Say small equals document dot, and then create element, and that's going to be a small tag. All right, now for the text that we want to put in here, I'm going to create a variable for, let's say, key text. Okay, so this is basically let's see, it's this right here. So what we want to be in the small text. Okay, so let's say key text and set that to document dot, and we want to create a text node and then pass in here just key. Okay, because remember, when we say let key in key code, that pertains to this. And this is a little confusing because when you look at an object, it's a key value, but we're also looking at key properties, so it is a little confusing. You could call this something else if you want. Now we also want the text for the actual key code that comes from the event object, so that will be the value, right? It'll be this, the value of the object. This is the key, this is the value. So let's call this one, we'll call this one value text. And then what we want to pass in here to get the value, we can say key codes and then use the index of the key. Right, so we could say key codes and then in brackets put any of these, and it will give us the value. And that's going to go in here. Now we just want to append the text nodes to the elements. So let's take the small element and let's say append child. And we want to append into the small the key text, which is like the title, which is this right here. Okay, then we want to put the actual value into the key div. So let's say div dot append child, and we're going to add in here the value text. All right, and then we need to append the small element into the div element. So let's say div append child again, and we want to pass in here the small. And then the last thing to do is to add the div to the DOM. So we're going to take that insert element, and we're going to append child, and then we're going to put the div in there. All right, so let's try that. I'm going to save, come over here, I'm going to hit just, we'll hit the letter K. Now, a couple things. One, we don't want this to show. Two, if I hit another key, it just adds to it, right? Every time it's just going to keep adding. So what I'm going to do is just clear the inner HTML of insert before we do anything. So we'll say insert dot inner HTML, and we'll set that to just nothing. Okay, so now when I hit a key, let's say the letter L, the welcome message goes away. Also, if I hit another one, it replaces it. Okay, because what we're doing is clearing everything before we actually, before we go on and do any of this. All right, now obviously this is much easier than doing this. But here we created, we looped through what we need, the data here, and then we just created a new div element for each one and then inserted it into the DOM. So in my opinion, this is a better way of doing it. But again, I'm not bashing this way either. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed this little project, and we'll do more of these throughout the course as we go.